This is video number 17 in our study of the book of Revelation, and we're going to start with Revelation chapter 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. Now, what is Jerusalem being described as? Coming down out of heaven, dressed as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. So when you are reading the New Testament and you are reading about Jerusalem, you need to understand that Jerusalem is God's people. When you're hearing about the temple in Jerusalem, you need to know that the temple are God's people and Jerusalem are God's people. So be sure to write that down in your book. You know, we're talking about the symbolism that God has established in the word in order for us to understand certain things. We've been talking about that with regard to slavery. What did he establish with that in order to help us to understand how we sell ourselves into slavery, how a slave is treated versus how a family member is treated versus how a foreign slave is treated versus how a servant within community is treated. I mean, these things sound terrible until we understand what God is trying to communicate to us. That if you want to be adopted into sonship, if you want to be part of this thing, you want to be part of this family, you have to live a certain way. Otherwise, you're going to be treated as an outsider. You're going to be treated as a foreigner. And a foreign slave is treated differently from a slave who is part of the Israelites. They are also treated as one who is being ruled over because they have not ruled over themselves. That's important for us to understand. If it's difficult for you to understand, I'll tell you who you need to take that up with. God, not me, because all I am is a messenger. I'm just helping you to understand what he has established in the word. So if it's hard, then you need to talk to him. And also, you need to stop making it about race, because otherwise you're bringing a concept that he established and you're bringing to him and imposing judgment on him for what the world has done and what the world has distorted. You have to speak on what he established. You have to speak on his authority. Otherwise, don't expect him to respond. I mean, frankly, don't expect him to respond, because he has said, if you don't love truth, you'll be handed over to deception. You'll be banging your head against a wall trying to figure this out with your carnality based on what the world has taught you. When we talk with God, we need to talk with him based on what we've done in our hearts, based on his word and what he has established. So that if you're having difficulty understanding something, you're having difficulty hearing from him, how you need to go to him is you need to say, Lord, you've said this in your word about this particular thing that you're sorting through with him. You've said this in your word. I'm sitting in your counsel. I want to learn from you. And you conform your heart to him, and you conform your heart to the scriptures, even and especially when they're difficult to understand. If the devil has gone after what God has established, it just might be because it's important. It just might be that you having understanding regarding a particular message is a threat to the devil. And for that reason, he distorts it and causes the world to be deceived, because it's important enough that he would invest his time there. So it should be important enough, and it should be a sign to you that you need to make it important to understand. So chapter 21, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. Now, going along with what I have just said, that the devil is going to deceive and he's going to distort, how many people follow what's going on in Israel, what's going on in literal Israel and Jerusalem, physical Israel and Jerusalem, looking for signs of the times, listening to conspiracy theorists and those who speak out of the delusions of their mind that the temple's going to be built, that sacrifices are happening, that the red heifer is here. How many people do that? Why do you think they do that? Why do you think that the devil was motivated to distort and deceive so that we don't understand that these things are happening in us, in the body, in the temple, because then we don't know what we're looking for. And the problem is that people who are looking in their carnality, who are studying in their carnality, who are listening with their carnality, they're going to look in their carnality for something carnal because they don't know what it is to get into the heart and spirit. They don't know what it is to hear from God. And that is the crux of counterfeit Christianity. Everything is carnal. Everything is superficial. So how can you expect to receive knowledge and understanding? It's a game changer when you start understanding the spiritual significance. Then the pieces start to make sense. Then the timelines start to make sense. One of the biggest ones, one of the most significant that I think of is the throwing down of the sanctuary and the termination of the daily sacrifice. That is a critical piece of information to understand us as the sanctuary, or God's witnesses as the sanctuary and God's witnesses as the daily sacrifice, 1,260 days to be exact. That is a critical piece of information for us to be able to understand what's happening in the end times and what's happening based on the pattern that he's established, that he does nothing without warning through his prophets first, which is what we learned from Amos, which is also that there's going to be this 7-year period beginning with this 1,260 days of prophecy and calling you in, and 4 trumpets blowing, which also call you in. That's why the trumpets were established in the Bible, to call in the Israelites and also to set out. That's why those trumpets are being built. And so you understand that that's the beginning of the 7-year period, that in the middle of that, the sanctuary and the daily the sanctuary is thrown down, the daily sacrifice is abolished. So the witnesses are killed when the beast rises from the abyss, 3.5 days, date of your prophecy. So 3.5 years later, the resurrection will take place. But during that 3.5 years, or until that 3.5 years, you got 1,290 days, 42 months of the Antichrist reign. And on the 1,290th day from the time that the witnesses are killed, the abomination of desolation is set up. God's jealous wrath is incited. Blessed is the one who reaches 1,335 days. That not only makes sense in terms of timeline, it has to make sense to the heart of God. And some people have talked about and insisted that the witnesses don't come until the very end of that time. Well, then why are they coming? They're coming at the very last minute to say, hurry up and repent. No, God does nothing without warning through his prophets first. That's his pattern. That's what he has established. Not only in Amos, but that's what he said throughout that's what he's done throughout the entire word. That's why Jonah ran. Jonah tells us why he ran. He tells God why he ran. This is why I didn't want to go and tell them that destruction was coming, because I knew you were merciful. I knew you would relent. I don't want to go, speak a message that you're not going to do. So if it were any other case, if he engaged in any other pattern, sending destruction before he sends those witnesses, then Jonah wouldn't have ran, because then Jonah was just confirming what God was already starting. So please be sure to write in your book that Jerusalem is a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. Jerusalem is the church. Israel is the church. Zion is the church. The temple is the church. The body is the church. These are all things that God has established in order to help us understand who we are in him, who he is in us, who we are to him, and who he is to us, who we are to each other, who we are as integral in our functions within a body, in our functions within the design of the temple, for example, the capstone, which keeps everything, or the plumb line, which keeps everything straight and right and staying upright. The cornerstone, the precious cornerstone, which is Christ. The foundation, which is the apostles and the prophets. All integral. Because if you don't have any one of those, that temple's going to fall. The government that's going to reign together. The nation that is supposed to be set apart to God. Because we look at different nations and we look at them as being separate, don't we? God established a nation as being, this is my nation. Every other nation is of the world, but this is my nation, to help us to understand how he set us apart and that we must continue to remain set apart, circumcised, holy, conformed to him, not conformed to the pattern of the world. So he sees Jerusalem coming down from heaven, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. Again, in previous scriptures, we see that she's dressed in white, the righteous acts of God's people, white linen, clean white linen, which stands for the righteous acts of God's people. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them." What's God's dwelling place? Well, God's dwelling place is heaven, but his dwelling place is also in us, has been in us as the temple of God. And now John is seeing a new heaven and a new earth, so his dwelling place is with us. We're with him now. We live in the same household because we're married to him. There's another example of that symbolism that he wants us to understand. Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. No more death, no more sinful flesh, no more physical flesh, which, by the way, does not mean that we're just spirit, because we've already been told that we receive glorified bodies and we're like the angels. So I don't know where people are getting that from, but it's false doctrine. It's very clear that we receive a particular body. It's simply a glorified body and does not have the sinful state that we had in the current body that we're in right now, in our former body. He who was seated on the throne said, "I'm making everything new." Then he said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." He said to me, "It's done. I'm the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all the liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death." So he's giving water to us without cost from the spring of life. He is living water, freely giving living water to us, understanding and knowledge, which is interesting because, living water is free. So it doesn't really make sense that you're paying for it in your tithing at a counterfeit church, does it? And it just so happens that that's not actually living water that's going on over there. And I will be their God, and they will be my children. So again, here's another aspect of God's truth. We're going to be his children. We're also going to be his bride. We're also going to be his wife. We're also going to be we've also been his temple. And all of these aspects, by the way, and I talked about this in a previous video that someone was asking me, why is it that we have to go through all these steps? Because if you understand the heart of God and you're understanding the posture and the things that he's established, then there are certain steps in order to get into that posture. You don't just fall into a posture. You have to do work inside of yourself in order to get there. I'm not adding to the scroll. I'm sharing my testimony on how God has taught me to get into that posture. If you have a different way of doing it, then do it. But I stand on what I'm doing and what I'm teaching because I know it from my own personal testimony of what he's built in me, of it standing on the word of God, of the position, the posture that it brings me into. So to those who are victorious, they will inherit all of this. How are they victorious? Because they have done this work. And I will be their God, and they will be my children. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, who are the cowardly? Those who are wicked and lazy servants, those who pick and choose what it is that they're going to do, those who bury the treasure and don't share what God is trying to build on in them, their testimony and their lampstand, the unbelieving, those who don't have a relationship with him, those who have the appearance of godliness but deny his power, those who don't do the things that he has commanded, live the life that he modeled, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters and all liars, They will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. Now, the one thing that I want to tell you is that we look at that and we think, oh, these are pagans. These are pagans. These couldn't be people who are in churches. But what does God say? He's never talking about pagans unless he says pagans. Most of the time, he's talking about those who are in these counterfeit churches. Come out of her, my people. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we eat with you in your name? And he's going to turn to them and he's going to say, depart from me, evildoers, I never knew you. These are those who claim to be Christian, claim to know him, but they don't know him and he doesn't know them. And so by this time, they will have been consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. That's the second death. The second death is eternal. Do not be deceived by false doctrines such as that in Seventh-day Adventist, who can't comprehend a God who would punish you for eternity and all of the things that he's established in the word to help you understand. You need to return to me. Hey, come back. Hey, these are the things that I command. Hey, I'm punishing you because you're not obeying me. Hey, I'm disciplining you because I love you. And then finally, after all of these things, what more could have been done for his vineyard? Why did it yield only bad grapes? Finally, after all this, and even after putting his people through Satan being released again so that he can give one last ditch effort for people to be saved, and people think that he won't punish forever and ever after all the disgusting filth that has gone on. Think about what's gone on in the Catholic Church in his name being profaned, him being blamed, people turning against God because of the things that have been done in his name, because of the children who have been destroyed in his name. And you think he won't punish forever, that the smoke of their torment, as he says in the word, will not rise forever and ever? That's of concern, isn't it? That seems to me a very wicked heart that doesn't want to accept, first of all, who God says he is, second of all, the pattern he's established, and third, that he has promised to vindicate his children who have suffered at the hands of the wicked, who have endured so that the wicked would have a chance to come in. Oh, there's going to be eternal torment, and the smoke of that torment is going to rise forever and ever. He is both a merciful God and a punitive God. He will punish. He will avenge. He will bring his wrath. And he will destroy. And guess what? It's not he's righteous and he's wrathful. No, he's wrathful in his righteousness. Too many stories being made up about this in these current times. That's why I'm speaking so intently about this, is because there are too many false and wicked narratives around who God is, rather than knowing him, speaking on who he says he is, knowing him through relationship, understanding that those things that have been brought in your life were not brought by the devil. They were sent by him. Too many wicked people thinking that that's a destructive teaching because they don't want to believe in the word that God has given us. Verse 9, one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls of the 7 last plagues came and said to me, come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. He carried me away in the spirit to a mountain great and high, and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God. It shone with the glory of God, and its brilliance was like that of a very precious jewel, like jasper, clear as crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates, and with 12 angels at the gates. On the gates were written the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. There were 3 gates on the east, 3 on the north, 3 on the south, and 3 on the west. The wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. He's describing a kingdom. He's describing a temple. He's describing who makes up that kingdom and that temple. The angel who talked with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city, its gates and its walls. Okay, he's also talking about a city, his people. The city was laid out like a square, as long as it is wide. He measured the city with a rod and found it to be 12,000 stadia in length and as wide and high as it is long. So it's a cube. The angel measured the wall using the human measurement, and it was 144 cubits thick. The wall was made of jasper and the city of pure gold, as pure as glass. The foundations of the city walls were decorated with every kind of precious stone. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth onyx, the sixth ruby, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the seventh turquoise, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. The 12 gates were 12 pearls, each gate made of a single pearl. The great street of the city was of gold, as pure as transparent glass. I did not see a temple in the city because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. The city does not need the sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb its lamp. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor to it. On no day will its gates ever be shut, for there will be no night there. The glory and honor of the nations will be brought into it. Nothing impure will ever enter it, nor will anyone who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. We're being fitted together to be a holy temple to rise in the Lord, a holy city, a holy nation, a body, a church, a kingdom. And look how precious and beautiful we will be. Now, why did God establish these stones? Because these stones had value and they had beauty, and as clear as crystal, they have purity. I did not see a temple in the city because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. Now, I've told you in several different videos that you can make whatever building you want. Doesn't mean it's God's temple. I mean, God rejected the second temple because of what was going on in it and said it was going to be torn down. It was going to be thrown down. And as a matter of fact, the temple from the time that Christ came was him. And so I've told you from the very beginning that Solomon dedicated the temple, the first temple, to the Lord, but it wasn't until God responded and said, I've heard your prayer and I've chosen this place for my dwelling. Why is there not a physical temple? And why is it that we're not being described as the third temple here? Because God's presence is dwelling among us. We will be living with God, among him. So there's no reason for us to have to, for us in the Old Testament, right? The Israelites to have to go to a temple in order to go to that presence. There's no reason. I mean, right now we're described as the present or the temple of God because he dwells in us. But we have so much right now in our sinful state, and also in what is being built in us and how we're learning, where we're pursuing him, and sometimes we don't hear from him, or our flesh is fighting against him, and all of these things that it's not the way that it's going to be in eternity. In eternity, we're just going to be with him. We're going to be in him and he in us, the way that Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. That's what he wanted. We'll be as one, not in a state where we have part of ourselves or part of our state that is constantly fighting against him and then trying to get back to him and then pursuing him. I mean, it's exhausting. It is exhausting. It's hard. But here we see we're married to him. We are the wife of the Lamb. And so there's no temple in the city because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. They've always been what determined the temple. They have to inhabit that place. Otherwise, that's not their temple. And they are in this city among us. They are the temple. And so God has been building this lampstand in us, this testimony in us, on which he's going to place his light for us to shine, because we are the light of the world, but we are to shine his light. And verse 23 said, the city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp. And remember that Jesus was saying, as he was teaching the people, and he was talking with them just before he was crucified, you're going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light before darkness overtakes you. Whoever walks in the dark does not know where they are going. Believe in the light while you have the light, so that you may become children of the light. That's John 12:35-36. So what is he representing here when he says the city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor to it. The nations will walk by its light. We're going to know truth. We're going to have wisdom. We're going to have understanding. There's not going to be any more deception. There's not going to be any more fighting with the lies of this world, with the lies of our flesh, with the carnality that tries to take control and wants glory and confuses us. No, we're going to walk by his light, and that's it. There's going to be understanding and wisdom that will cover the earth. No more grief. Every tear is going to be wiped away. And on no day will its gates ever be shut, for there will be no night there. The glory and honor of the nations will be brought into it. Think about that for a minute. All the best of what God has been building this whole time in his people, that is all that we are going to be surrounded by. No more darkness, no more threat, no more danger. Only the glory of God, only the honor of nations, the honor of what we have done, how we've been built, the righteous acts of God's people. That's our honor. Nothing impure will ever enter it, nor will anyone who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. No one's going to enter the body that way. No one's going to defile his church. No one will bring false gods and idols into his temple. No one's going to hurt his children or oppress the weak. And no spirit is going to harass us. Our enemies will not rule over us. We will live in peace in the land. The trees will give their fruit. The land will flow with milk and honey. We will drink from the well of life without cost. And this fulfillment, this promise that was made to Abraham will be fulfilled. That is the joy that's set before us. And there's not that much time. We can do anything for this amount of time. Thank you for listening. God bless you. And I'll see you in the next video.